Okay. If you have any questions before I get going, why don't you go ahead and ask me now, and I'll try to answer them. And if not, we'll go ahead and move on. Now, anybody with a question? No questions. So Jamie, if you can share your screen. This the very first picture, I'm going to show you a basic picture of the airplane. It's in the Airplane Flying Handbook, a picture 3-5. It has a picture of an instrument panel. You ready, Jamie?
I'm almost there. I'm getting there. I'm maneuvering screens, and here we go. It takes 1 second here. Okay.
Now, I don't know what is everybody in a student pilot, private, commercial, at least? Can you guys tell me a level of what you are, where you guys are in your training?
I'm a student pilot.
Okay. Anybody else?
Student pilot, private pilot.
Private, okay. Joanna?
Private pilot.
Private, okay. No, I just want to make sure, you know, that I know who's, you know, where you guys are, so that way I know basically how deep I need to get into it, okay? Now, the reason why we talk about this particular topic is because on every check ride, the examiner is required to ask some questions, a certain level of questions in regards to the instrument panel of the aircraft that you're going to be flying in, okay, for taking for your check ride. So the basic instrument panel, okay, is 3-5. You got one page up. It's there you go. If you can make it a little bigger right there, that'll be good. So this is the basic instrument panel of a trainer. If you notice on top, it's got a PFD, which is a like in a glass cockpit. But right now, we'll just stay with what the instrument panel of a basic Cessna 172, 152.
Thank you.
Did you say something, Sherry?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought I was on mute. I'm so sorry.
Okay. Oh, don't be sorry. That's okay. At least
My
somebody talked.
apologies. My
No, no.
apologies.
Don't
So
worry
sorry.
about it. Okay. So the basic panel of an airplane is divided into, I'm going to, this is a question I ask usually for all instrument pilots or even instrument instructor, is divided into 4 systems, okay? 4 different types of systems make up an instrument panel. And the reason why it's that way is so that for instrument flying or even for VFR flying, if one system quits, you still have 3 more that can help you get home or fly the aircraft. So let's talk about the very first one. So let me go back. Per this panel that Jamie has, you'll see the very first top left is the airspeed indicator, okay? The second one and the one in the middle to the right is the attitude. Right of the attitude is the altimeter. Bottom left, the second row is going to be the turn and bend coordinator, okay? In the middle is your compass, the directional gyro. And on the right, you have the VSI, vertical speed indicator. To the right, we do show two VOR heads, okay? We'll discuss that at a later time. So what are the 4 systems that composes an instrument panel, okay? Now, the very first one we all know is called the pitot-static system. And Jamie, if you can go to the Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge, Pilot Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge, and it's going to be drawing 8-17. 17.
Okay, chapter 8. Okay.
Chapter 8 and 17.
Okay, I'm going down. Chapter 8-17 coming up. Okay, there we go. 12, 14, nope, and 16 and 17. There we
17. All right. So the pitot-static system, it's very, very simple. Okay, you have 3 instruments that are hooked up to the pitot-static system, and that's not it. Let me go back and let me get that's hang on for a second. That's a try 812.
Okay, 8 and 12.
Top left corner. One more. That's 813. And keep going. Keep going. 812 right there.
Okay.
Pitot-static system. You have 3 instruments that are hooked that work off the pitot-static. And obviously, if by the system itself, it tells you it's the pitot-static. Okay. The pitot referring to the pitot tube. The static refers to the static port. You have the 3 instruments that work off of that are the vertical, the airspeed indicator. In the middle is the VSI, and then the altimeter. Now, how you can see where how it's hooked up, but let me explain exactly what that does. Each instrument basically compares. Compares air within the aircraft and where air outside the aircraft. Okay, by that I mean, for example, the pitot tube. When we're standing still, basically there is no air going over it, so it reads 0. When we're going forward, the pitot tube has 2 holes. In the front, it has the pitot. It has the hole. That's where the ram air goes through. And then in the back, there is in the back of it, and I do have another drawing that shows that. If I can find it.
Richard, you're muted, Richard. Unmute yourself real quick.
Okay, I guess I muted myself. I didn't know I did that. The pitot tube compares ram air with static air. So the blue line you can see is hooked up to the airspeed indicator. So what you have is inside each instrument, you have a bunch of wheels and gadgets and what we call bellows, which is like an accordion. What it does is it compares the two different types of air, the static air and versus the ram air. So as you're moving forward, the ram air goes through the pitot tube. It goes inside the airspeed indicator. You have the static air, which also goes from the static port, is also inside the airspeed indicator, but in a different part. And what it does is, as you go forward, the air going through the pitot tube goes up the red line, as you can see, okay? And it pushes on a bunch of wheels and gauges. And what it does is it moves the airspeed indicator. The reason you have the static port that's hooked up in the back also of the airspeed indicator. As you go to altitude, okay, as we know, the pressure outside is different. So pressure at this, or the outside air pressure at 3,000 feet is slightly different than 2 and then 1. So therefore, you have the outside air, which goes into the static port in the back of the airspeed indicator. And as you go in altitude, all those gadgets inside compensate for the different for the air outside that's slightly different as you go up in altitude. It compensates for that and gives you a reading for the airspeed indicator. So let's talk about the airspeed. There's something goes wrong. For example, something that's very typical. You wash your airplane, and sometimes what people do is they put a little masking tape over the pitot-static or the static port. And the reason why they do that is as you wash the airplane, you don't want water to go inside the pitot tube and inside the static port. The water stays inside. Come nighttime, it freezes. You have condensation, and it can block the static port. So people will go ahead and put a little piece of masking tape over it. Let's say you were to forget to remove that masking tape, okay? And you decide to take off and fly. Is the airspeed going to work? The answer is yes. But what it's going to do is it's going to compare the trapped air inside the blue line and it's going to compare the rim air that's coming as you go up in altitude. And basically, it's going to still read your airspeed, but it's going to be slightly inaccurate only because the air that's the static port should be measuring for different altitude is not there. Okay, so it still works, but it's inaccurate. How inaccurate? Probably assessing 150, 172. If you go up to 8,000, 9,000 feet, it may be about 5 miles an hour inaccurate. Not a big deal, okay? But still, it reads inaccurate. Now, let's go for the static port. We move that piece of tape, and we have the static port. The altimeter and the VSI. They basically do the exact same thing. The altimeter inside is what we call a bellows, okay? And the bellows are sealed. It's like an accordion. And it's got trapped air inside. The outside of the altimeter, or still inside the case, you have the tube, the blue tube going to the hooked up to the outside of the case, and that's the static air. So what you have is trapped air inside that bellows, a little accordion, trapped air, and then you have the static, the outside of the case, which is vented over outside the aircraft. So imagine you take you're sitting at an airport. Let's say the elevation is 3,000 feet, and which obviously we know we can correct with the barometric knob for the pressure. But let's say the airport is at 3,000 feet. You decide to take off. Okay, now you climb to 4,000 feet. The air outside is going to be different. And the bellows inside, that trapped air, is going to sense the difference between the air outside and the trapped air, which is always the same inside the bellows. So what's going to happen is the air outside the case from the outside is going to be thinner. So what that does is it allows the bellows to expand. So as you climb up, the bellows expands because the trapped air is constant, okay? And the air inside the case from the static port, it changes. So as you go up in altitude, the air gets thinner. So the trapped air inside that bellows, the accordion, expands, and through a bunch of gears, what it does, it gives you an altimeter reading. So you go up to 8,000 feet, it reads 8. So now as you go down in altitude, the bellows is still the same, but the air that's going through the static port, now the pressure gets thicker because it increases because we're going down in altitude. So therefore, it would put pressure on the bellows, which means now it's going to squeeze it, which makes it go the other way. And through all those gears, it gives you the altitude. So basically, you have trapped air and outside air, and the altimeter just compares the two, and it gives you an altitude readout. Any questions so far? Come on, somebody. Somebody's got to have some question. Nobody?
I just don't know where to start with my question. So like, okay.
Go ahead. Just
Almost-
talk.
Okay. So so I guess the inside when you're up in the plane in the sky,
Mm-hmm.
the inside air, it's calculating that too.
Well,
No,
remember,
that's-
the static port is on the outside of the aircraft.
Yeah, so if your window's open, say you have to, that doesn't do anything for
That doesn't
that?
do anything to it because the static port is a little hole that that has a tube attached to it. It's on
Yeah.
the side of the airframe. So
Okay,
it has nothing to do with the inside of the airplane.
okay. I
Okay.
just, yeah,
So whether whether your window is open or not, it does not affect that little hole on the outside.
oh, okay, so,
Okay.
okay, so it goes, the faster you go, the
Well,
faster
Okay.
that,
So, no, think about speed. So the faster you go, the stronger the rim air goes through that pitot tube to the hole, the more pressure there is that goes inside the airspeed indicator, it gives you a higher number. So if you're at 3,000 feet, okay, the static port, the inside the airspeed indicator is 3,000 feet. The pressure of the air outside is steady, okay? And if you speed up, you have more ram air going through. That means it pushes the bellows and the gears, and it gives you it gives you a different airspeed. It reads at a different airspeed. So you have more ram air, more airspeed, less ram air, slowing down, less airspeed.
Thank you.
It's got nothing to do with the inside. Now there is how can I say, for instrument flying, okay? They have, you see where on that drawing it says blockage, right?
Yeah.
And next to it says static port. What can happen, and I was going to go into that in a few, I'll go into that in a few minutes. Let me explain how the VSI worked, and I'll give you some of the issues that can happen, okay? The VSI is built just like an altimeter inside. It's got a bellows, okay? It's like an accordion. And then it's got air on the outside of, it's inside the casing, but it's outside, it's surrounding the bellows. So just like the altimeter, you go up, the air is thinner, the bellows is going to, how can I say, get bigger. And as you go down in altitude, the air gets thicker, it's going to compress on the bellows, which is going to change the VSI. Now there's only one, so there's one caveat to that, okay? On the VSI, we are measuring the rate that the outside air is changing. That's what we're doing. So how do we do that? Or how does the VSI do that? That accordion I was talking about has what we call a little pinhole. It's a certain size pinhole, okay? Just think of a balloon. You put, let's say you blow up the balloon, okay? And everybody's, how can I say, you blow up the balloon, it gets to a certain size. And it's, if you close the hole, the balloon stays inflated. Imagine if you were to put a pin-sized hole in the balloon. The air is going to start coming out, correct? So you can blow at a certain rate, or as you're blowing up the balloon, and that hole is letting a certain amount of air out. So if the same amount of air going out to that hole as you're blowing in, basically there's nothing happening to the balloon. So you have 0 on the feet per minute. Now, let's say you're blowing the balloon with that pinhole, okay? But you're blowing in faster than the air is coming out. So the balloon is getting bigger, okay? So now it's comparing the difference, how fast it's getting bigger versus the air that's coming out in that little pinhole, and it gives you a number. That's the VSI. That number is trained to 500 feet a minute, 1,000 feet a minute, 1,500 feet a minute. So now, let's say again, you're blowing up the balloon and you stop. It goes back to 0. Now you start to suck air out of the balloon, okay? You can only suck so much and so fast. So the pinhole is going to measure how much the difference is for you sucking the air out versus the air that's outside, and it gives you the opposite. So that's how you going up or you're going down. And with all those gears and things and wheels inside this VSI, that's how you get a number going up or going down. Basically, it compares the air in the bellows. It has that little hole in it. It just compares how fast the air from the outside is pushing on the bellows, as you go up in altitude, or how fast the bellows expands because you're going down altitude, so the air decreases, so the bellows expands, and it just compares the difference. So therefore, when they're both equal, you have 0. When one is more than the other, you have +1, +2, or -1, -2, which is equates to going up or going down. Any questions so far? Now, are you going to be, do you need to know that 100% for your private? No. Okay. you just basically you need to understand that the static port is hooked up to all three instruments. It affects all three, okay? The pitot tube, if you block it from where the ram air, like if you were to leave the pitot tube cover on, if you do and you take off, altimeter is still going to work, VS style is still going to work, because it's comparing outside air to the static port. But, whoops. You can still hear me, right? Okay.
Yeah.
I thought I was muted there for a second. So it compares outside air with the trapped air already inside the casing of the altimeter or the VSI. So if you were to leave your pitot tube on or your pitot tube cover, it doesn't make any difference. Your airspeed reads 0 because there is no ram air going through, but the other two instruments work. If the static port was to get clogged, your pitot tube is your airspeed is still going to work because it's you have ram air going through. It's just that the air from the static port is not changing, therefore your airspeed becomes inaccurate, okay? But it's still going to work. So you have the basic two differences of things that can go wrong. The static port can be blocked, or the pitot tube can be blocked, okay, for the ram air. So with those two items, you have an idea of what can go wrong with the airspeed. And that's basically for the pitot static system. Any questions?
I actually do have a question. Can
Go ahead
I
for
ask it now? So when we're doing our inspection before we take off, we're always supposed to check the pitot tube and the static port. And since you're here, like what kind of things do get stuck in there? They're so small, like just bugs and
oh yeah, you will be a fly, a mosquito, okay. A fly goes in, builds a nest and leaves.
Okay.
Bees. I mean, you would be surprised how can I say, how small of an animal or an item can go inside those the static port or the pitot tube.
Okay. And we just kind of do like a quick little visual, but if something's really stuck in there, how would I know?
You would not know.
when I get in?
That's exactly it. So you do your pre-flight, you look at the static port, make sure there's nothing blocking the static port. Like I said, a piece of tape, like, after washing the airplane, okay?
Yes, okay.
Or for example, let's say you just you had the aircraft painted. You go by the static port, and if you see paint on there, guess what? They didn't do a good job because they painted over the hole.
Okay.
Or
yeah, that makes sense.
yeah, so you just it's almost impossible for your naked eye to look inside all the way in. For example, you're flying and you hit a bee while you're flying. You won't even know it. It goes through the hole and goes all the way in the back. You'll have no way of knowing. Okay. But what will happen is your airspeed indicator means, like, let's say you're flying on 100 miles an hour and you hit that bee and it goes inside the pitot tube. Your airspeed may go from 100 to 90 to 80. All of a sudden, you say, wait a minute, I haven't changed the power setting. Because remember, it needs, the pitot tube is a certain size, it's got a certain size hole, and it is designed for a certain amount of air to go through. So if a bee goes through that hole, okay, or somebody builds a nest inside, it may block half of it. That means you're only getting half the air in that tube. So here you are on your takeoff, and you're going like crazy, you got full power, the airplane wants to fly, but your airspeed is saying 40. Well, guess what? Something is wrong with the airspeed indicator, most likely the pitot tube. Okay. So the idea is, if you know generically what is wrong, what is the telltale signs of what something is wrong, you can figure it out. Okay.
If people have take off with the pitot tube cover on their airplane, I've seen people do it, and they're on the runway, they're rolling down, they're going fast, and then they have to abort or, figure out, why don't I have my airspeed? And then they abort or not because their plane is ready to fly. And then they realize, oops, I forgot to take off the pitot tube cover. because it's blocking the air from going in.
You know,
And
and I'll
so
be the person to say,
they come
"I've done-"
back?
Yeah. Say
Or do
again?
they just keep flying?
Well, either or, if you're on a, I mean, if you're on a really, it just depends on the situation.
You know,
I'll let Richard answer that.
well, you know what? And I tell you what I've done with as an instructor. I've left the pitot tube on purpose and make the student fly the airplane, take off and go just by the seat of your pants. The airplane would fly. Your actually says 0. So it's good sometimes for an instructor to do that. So the student, okay, and I'll guarantee you, depending how much you fly, you'll run an airplane. You will forget to remove the pitot tube, or there will be a bug inside that you didn't catch. You take off, you're rolling down the runway. You're at the end of, you're pulling back. You know, it's a short runway. You're about to pull back, and then you look at your airspeed. You say 0. You don't want to freak out. You know, gee, what do I do? Abort? Well, it's kind of too late because you're at the end of the runway already. Okay. The best thing to do is just keep on flying the airplane, because
Okay.
the airplane, the wings, they don't care if the airspeed indicator is working or not. It's
Okay.
still gonna fly. Okay.
Okay.
So I've actually done that with students, and go just one flight around the pattern and make them feel, hey, it still flies. Just because it's blocked doesn't mean it's not working.
Okay.
I mean, if it's not flying, it's not flyable. It's fine.
Okay.
Nothing wrong with that. So that, you know, so the idea is to basically understand that with those 3 items, okay, what the telltale signs are. Let me give a perfect example. You're flying at 3,000 feet, okay, and you're flying in ice. This is for instrument flying, but you never know. You're flying. It's cold outside. There's moisture, and there is icing. You know, it's 5 degrees or less, and you have moisture outside. The static port may get iced up. Now you're flying. You're at 3,000 feet, doing 100 miles an hour. You're level, straight and level. Then the static port gets iced up. You'll have no idea that something is not working, because at 3,000 feet, you're level. So the VSI says 0. You're doing 100 miles an hour. It's going to stay on. It's going to stay at 100 miles an hour. And you're level at 3,000. Your altimeter is going to say 3,000 feet. The only way you'll get to know the difference is, let's say you want to climb or you want to descend. Let's talk about descending. You bring the power back. airspeed starts to slow down some, and you go down. Now, even though we bring the power back, okay, the nose will go down. You'll pick up, you may pick up a few knots, you may pick up some airspeed. Well, what's going to happen is the airspeed will, as we know, that it's inaccurate. So the airspeed will still work, and you'll have no idea exactly how many miles an hour is going to be off. But now let's talk about the VSI and altimeter. The static port was clogged at 3,000 feet. It has nothing to compare. Everything is basically the air outside comparing with the bellows inside are the same. You decide to go down, okay? The air that should be going through the static port is the same, because it's iced up. It does not sense any change in altitude. So you have trapped air inside the tubes. So what your altimeter going to do? It's going to read 3,000, because it doesn't have anything to compare to. What's the VSI going to read? It's going to read 0, because it has nothing to compare it to. So if the static port was to get clogged at a certain altitude and airspeed, you'll have no way of knowing until you change altitude. So the idea is to understand basically just the basic things that how those instruments are linked together, and some of the problems that may occur. Should again, for your private, should you know exactly what each problem is? Not really. Okay, but at least understand that all 3 are hooked up together, and yes, the static port affects the VSI and affects the altimeter, and a little bit the airspeed, and the pitot tube is mostly for the airspeed. Excuse me. Well, is all for the airspeed, and if that was to get clogged, it won't affect the altimeter or the VSI.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions? Now, just in case some of you are wondering, okay, what they have done is they have something called, and I don't have a picture of it, something called an alternate static source. Basically, what they've done is they've hooked up a second line next to the static port, and they're venting it inside the airplane, inside the cabin. Okay, and it's got a little lever that you can turn it on and turn it off. So if you ever are flying and you get iced up, you're flying bad weather, it gets iced up and you're going down, okay, what can happen is that's alternate static source. If you turn it on, what's happening is you're getting air from the cabin versus outside. Now, I don't want to go too much, but the air outside is a little different in the cabin, because when we're flying through the air, okay, the air going over the airframe can create a little bit of pressure, okay, where we won't get that pressure with the static source that's inside. So if we were to turn on this alternate static source, the VSI would come back to life, the altimeter would come back to life, and the airspeed will get more accurate, okay? But it won't be as accurate as if you were using the static ports that's vented outside. For example, your altimeter may be 50 feet off. So at 3,000 feet, you're really at 3,100 feet or 3,050 feet. Your VSI may constantly read a climb of 50 feet per minute, which is equal to 0. But at least you understand, oh, this is what's happening. Okay, I know how to fix that. Or at least the most important part, you know what to tell the mechanic, the symptoms. That way it helps him troubleshoot what the issues are. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So we have four, I mentioned earlier, we have 4 systems that make up the instrument panel, okay? The first one was the pitot-static system. The second one is electrical. And basically the only item right now that works off the basic 6-pack, if you go on page 818 of the same book there, Jamie, is the turn and bank coordinator. That's done with by electricity. It's
What page?
basic.
What do you want?
818.
818, okay.
And it's the pilot handbook of aeronautical knowledge.
Got it.
All right. That's electrical. So if you were to turn the battery off, for example, that will stop working. But will your altimeter stop working? No. Will your VSI or airspeed stop working? No, because they're not hooked up to each other. Okay. It needs electricity to work, and it's got a gyro inside. So when you turn the battery on or the master switch on, it would send the electricity to the gyro starts to turn, and then it becomes accurate after a few minutes of warming up. And then now you know whether your turn and bank coordinator is working. Okay, I'm not going to go into, how can I say, how it's built inside. I just want to say that basically it's a gyro inside and it needs electricity. So system number 2, okay? Let's go to system number 3. We have
What page is that? Which page?
and you know, I don't have a good page for it.
Okay,
But
then
if you
I'll
go 824, okay, and that shows an attitude indicator. Now, I'll tell you what, once you go back to the airplane flying handbook, the 3-5,
Okay.
okay. System number 3, gyro is the suction. We know what the suction. We have a suction gauge on the airplane, right? We have a suction pump. That the suction pump. Okay, make it bigger. Okay, the attitude indicator and your compass. Those 2 items are driven by the suction pump. It's and it needs a certain amount of suction for it to be accurate. Now, by that, basically, what's happening is you have a suction pump. It sucks air from inside it's a tube that's hooked up to the back of the each instrument, and the pump is sucking air. As it sucks air, it turns wheels and gadgets, and then what you have is you have the attitude indicator and you have your compass with that starts to work. It needs a certain amount of suction, and that's where the suction gauge comes in. And we all know that the suction has like a green arc on in it. And the idea is when that gauge, that little needle is in the green, you're getting the proper amount of suction for those items to work correctly. If the suction pump becomes worn, used, or starting to break, and here you are at full RPM or you're on cruise RPM, and the gauge is in the white, or it's acting like it's go from 0 to 6, and between 3 and 5 is the green part, green range, and here you are flying, and that needle is on 2. That means your pump is not working correctly, and that also means that the attitude and your compass will not be accurate. They'll still work, they just won't be accurate. So that's system number 3. System number 4 is not shown here, but it's called the whiskey compass. And that's basically the compass that we all use, that we set our DG by. So the reason why I say that's system number 4, because it's independent of anything that we have in the airplane. It does not need electricity. It does not need suction. It does not need pitot-static. We all know it just sits there, and it's got liquid inside, which happens to be alcohol, okay? And it works all by itself. It does bob around when you hit a bump, or when it's bumpy, you can see it move back and forth, because it works on its own. But if you're flying in smooth air, the compass is very accurate, and that's what the whiskey compass is very accurate, and that's what we, how can I say, set our compass. For those of us working on an instrument, you'll hear your instructor tell you that you should reset your mag compass every 10 minutes. You should check it with the whiskey compass to make sure that the two agree. Why is that? That's because the compass, which is based off suction, okay, can become inaccurate. For example, you add power, you reduce power. The suction pump is based on engine RPM. The faster you move, the faster the engine runs, the more it sucks. The less you go to idle, it doesn't suck as much. So if your pump is weak, the RPM, how can I say, affects how much it's working, how well it's working, which basically translates into your compass or attitude indicator being inaccurate. So that's why during your instrument training, your instructor will tell you, always compare your compass to the whiskey compass to make sure you reset them so that way it's accurate. So what you have basically is the basic 4. Okay, you have 4. What was my word I used? 4 systems that are hooked, that comprise the instrument panel. Electric system, which is for now just the turn and bend coordinator. We have the pitot-static system, that's number 2, which drives the VSI, altimeter, and the airspeed. The suction system, which is number 3, the DG and the compass. And last one is the whiskey compass, which is independent of all of them. Believe it or not, for IFR flying, a whiskey compass is required even in the 747, 757s. Every airplane made has to have a whiskey compass. That's how reliable the compass is. Now, there are exceptions, okay? Don't get me wrong. When you get into the big airplanes, they have a variety of ways of GPSs and stuff that tells them where they are. And if you meet the requirements the FAA sets, a whiskey compass is not required. But 99% of the airplane flying out there in G5s, whatever you're flying, it's required to have a whiskey compass, because it's one thing that never fails unless you run out of liquid, okay? Because the alcohol inside can dry up. So every annual inspection, the mechanic has to look at it, has to have a certain amount of liquid. He can add the alcohol inside. Okay, it's sealed, so it doesn't evaporate very easily, but it will always work as long as it has liquid in it. Any questions for anybody? I see a bunch of mutes out there, except for two of us. Okay.
Well, everybody thinks about their questions. I just want to add that, you know, all of these systems, well, most of these systems are I mean, if you're in flight, they're non-emergency situations unless you're in an IFR condition. And I think I see like a lot of private pilot and student pilots panicking, you know, for something like the vacuum going out in flight. I mean, obviously these are not good things. You don't want to be flying without the attitude, but you do have to remember if you're in VFR conditions, you can easily look out the window. The engine is not affected by any of these. And I feel like that's just something to know in the back of your head, because it can make you do a safe landing, get back, get it fixed with no issues. And that's just my little.
Jamie, I want you to do page 817 of the Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge.
Okay. 817, okay. Go, 817. Okay, all right, it's gotta go here. Share the screen. And hopefully this is the right page. Okay.
Okay, at the top. There you go. This right here represents, as you can see, the heading indicator and the attitude indicator. You have the suction gauge on the left. So here you have the vacuum pump. You can see it has two lines in it. One on the right says vent overboard. You have the vacuum pump. As you can see, it's how the arrows indicate it's sucking air. It's hooked up to the attitude indicator. It's hooked up to the, the heading indicator. And here you go, you have that suction gauge that tells you, right now it's at 5, that tells you how strong the vacuum pump is. So for some airplanes, you're idle on you're on the ground, you're just idling. That needle may go down to 2, okay? And that tells you you're not getting much suction out of that pump. Again, you have a low RPM. Here you are in cruise, you see 5 on there. And again, you have to, each gauge might be slightly different. Like I said, they have a green arc. For example, most of them would be between 4 and 6, means you're getting the proper amount of suction. That means that with that amount of suction, your DG, heading indicator, and attitude should work normally. So here you are, you're in an airplane and you're flying, and you're on takeoff and you're on cruise, and you look at that suction pump and it's down to 1 or 2. Well, that's fine. Okay, I'm flying VFR. Okay, I'm not gonna die. The engine's not gonna quit. Okay, the attitude will semi-work. Okay, your compass will be off often, so you have to reset it. You have to check it with your whiskey compass and keep resetting it. But the idea is when you land, you tell the owner, hey, by the way, the suction gauge was down to 2 when I was in normal cruise. That tells them something, okay? Tells them, okay, the very first thing is going to check is maybe the air filter could be clogged. He'll check, maybe notice there's a relief valves. Certain things may be wrong that may be blocking the pump from working normally. But at least he understands that, that he's got an issue with the vacuum system, maybe with the vacuum pump or the lines, versus you were to tell him, oh, by the way, when I was flying and I had to reset my compass every 5 minutes to match the whiskey compass. Well, okay, that tells me that it's not working correctly, but is it the compass that's not working, or are you not getting enough suction to make it work? So that's why it's important to understand how these things work. And that way, when you tell the mechanic, he understands exactly where to go to troubleshoot the particular system. Yeah. Flying VFR, you can cover up the instrument panel and still fly. The airplane will still fly, the engine will still run. You have an alternator that charges the electricity, that charges the battery. The alternator quits. Guess what? The engine's still going to run because the engine runs off the magnetos. So even though it's nice to have all these items, but none of them are necessary for flight in case of an emergency.
Even the battery, don't need it.
Exactly. There are airplanes out there that have no batteries. They have no radios. People hand prop them, they go fly around because it's not needed. Again, depending on the airspace, okay? But any questions?
Questions. We gotta have some questions. Make up a question. Stump the DPE. Ask him a question. Try to get him to not know the answer.
Oh, that's a good idea.
I know. That's what we should do every
We'll
other.
have a gift card. Whoever can
Yeah.
ask me a question and I can't answer it, we'll send you a gift card from Starbucks. How does that sound?
Like that.
Anybody want to take me up on it?
They're thinking.
With everybody's faces blanked out, I don't know whether people are thinking or laughing or
Crying.
smiling.
I'm laughing.
You're
Just-
laughing? Okay.
Yeah, I'm laughing.
Okay.
Next
Yeah, it's
time.
funny because that's one of the things I used to do when I was an instructor. When I teach quite a bit, I would tell my students they would get 1 hour of my time free, whether it was ground or flight, if they could come up with a question I didn't know. So a free hour of duel. I tell you, people that were interested, I used to give quite a few hours out, but also made the students study. And it got to a point where I became a better instructor because I kept getting a whole bunch of questions, and to get the right answer, I had to go study.
So a question for
Joanna?
you, Richard. I have
Go
a
ahead.
question.
Yeah.
So as a DPE, how involved do you get what types of questions would you come up with during your check ride for something like this?
No, okay. The question is this: what instruments do you have an instrument? Let's say a private pilot. Okay, I ask him about the instrument panel. What are the basic 6 instruments? I expect them to tell me all 6. And the next question is, which systems drives what? I expect the pitot-static system to all 3, the suction, for 2, and electrical for for your turning bank. I don't expect him to tell me about the whiskey compass, which is number 4. Okay, that's more to the instrument, or basically even more as an instrument instructor. I will ask them if your suction is not working, what happens to your DG or your attitude indicator. I expect them to say, hey, the suction is not working. The suction gauge says 0. Most likely my DG or attitude will not be working. Static port, if that gets clogged, what's going to happen to, what may not work. And if they just kind of tell me VSI and attitude won't work very well, I'm good enough. It's just very simple that they understand what's hooked up to what and what drives what. Did I answer your question?
It did. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think I have a question.
Okay.
If you're in the run up and so you're checking carb heat in the run up,
Mhm.
if you don't see, like, at what point is it concerning if you don't see any drop for carburetor heat in the run up?
All right. So you're at 1700 RPM, you're doing a run up and you pull the carb heat out. Okay. And nothing happens. That means that something is wrong. You should always get a drop in RPM carb heat. And without asking you if you understand why, I'll tell you that, cold air is very thick. Warm air is thin. Just think of density altitude. You're at sea level, it's cold. The engine, you get a certain, performance out of the airplane. You go to an airport that's 6,000 feet above MSL, your engine is not going to perform as well. So that's what the carburetor heat does. Okay. When you pull carburetor heat, it takes hot air from the exhaust and the muff, whatever else, and it directs it towards the carburetor. Hot air is thin. Hot, because it's thin, it doesn't give you as much of molecules in your, how can I say, in the carburetor to make the engine work perform 100%. So hot air is thinner, which makes the engine work, how can I say, not perform as much. So you should always get a, how can I say, a decrease in RPM. Now, how do I know? Let's say, for example, I had ice on the inside the carburetor, like people that fly where it gets cold, Minnesota, New York, up north. Okay, you start the engine, you do your run up, 1700 RPM. You pull the carburetor heat out, and remember, your POH will tell you how much of a drop you should see on the RPM. Okay, when you pull the carburetor heat, and I'm gonna pick a number. Let's say you should see the maximum is 100 RPM drop. So you're at 1700, you pull the carburetor heat, and it goes down to 1500. Well, that's pretty low. Well, gee, it's cold, it's January, I'm in Minnesota. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna leave the carburetor heat out for a minute, okay? And what's gonna happen is the hot air is gonna melt the ice that's formed inside the carburetor. And after a while, the ice goes away, the RPM will slowly creep back up to 1600 where it's supposed to be. So if you see that happen, that means you had ice on the carburetor. If you pull the carburetor heat and it goes to 200, you lose 200 RPM and it never goes back up, okay? It says at 50, and the books, the POA says you should only get 100, but you're getting 200, okay? Something is wrong. Now, if you still get full RPM, is the engine unsafe to fly? No. I may not want to use the carburetor heat, too much because I would get an excessive drop. But when I'm done flying the airplane, I'll go right to the mechanic. By the way, when I pull the carburetor heat, POH says 100, I'm getting 200. And basically, it may be an adjustment for the carburetor heat handle, because maybe you're letting too much air, hot air, thin air in the carburetor. So it's a minor adjustment, and then you move on. But again, the idea is as you do things, you want to make sure you see the proper reaction. And so that way you know how to troubleshoot an airplane. And you can tell the mechanic what you saw. It gives a great idea what he should look at. Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Anybody else?
I actually just want to ask a question with what you were just talking about. So if you're wanting to let that ice, melt away, like you were saying, about how long would something like that take? 5, 10 minutes? What?
Oh, it would take maybe 30 seconds at the most.
Oh, that's it. Okay.
That's it. You pull the carburetor heat. So you're at 1700, you should see a 100 RPM drop. You get 200, so you're down to 15. Let the carburetor stay there, and it will, within a few seconds, it will slowly creep and go back up. Within 30 seconds, you're back to full RPM, or to what you should have.
And you're saying you would fly anyways, even if you didn't get that?
It would depend on the airplane if I knew it very well. Okay. But the whole thing is, let's say I push the carburetor heat back in, I go back to normal RPM. Nothing wrong with that. That's okay. That's because the important part is, am I getting full RPM? Now, let's say it's summertime. Do I need carburetor heat during the summertime? Most likely not. Okay. I'm getting a big excessive drop. Okay, something is wrong. I'm not going to use carb heat. Yeah, maybe I'll go around. Maybe I'll go fly I said the word maybe, depending how comfortable you are. I'll go fly the airplane. If it's the winter time where I know I'm going to need carb heat, guess what? I'm taxing right back in and tell this guy, you need to fix it because I need the carburetor heat because it's cold outside and I may be susceptible to carburetor icing.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Joanna, did you have a question? I saw a few of you unmute.
No, I didn't. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else?
I saw in the chat, it said what book are you referring to?
Oh, I sent it over, the book we've been using today.
Yeah.
I sent it over in the chat. There was 2 books. It's the Airplane Flying Handbook. And what was the other one we were using today, Richard?
Pilot Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge.
I'll send them both over in the chat.
Okay.
Here's one and here's two. And they're free. They're online. Make sure, yeah, I got them both. Yep.
Yeah.
Free online through the FAA.gov.
You can download them, it doesn't take that long, and you always have access to them. If you have an iPad, I have a lot of my books on the iPad. That way I don't buy anything.
They're great books. There's
Great books.
so much information out there, but before you get anything else, I'd knock these books out first.
Awesome. Thanks. This is great information. Thank you so much.
Anybody else?
Well, Jamie, you said you put those in the chat where I don't see that.
Maybe that was a private chat. Okay, let me go back to everyone. Oh, here. Yeah, that was a private chat just to Skyflower. Okay, let me go to everyone. And
Thank you so
boom.
much.
You're welcome. There
Well,
it is.
Well, we have at least one more minute. Where is everybody? Where is everybody from?
Sacramento,
Who's that?
Cherie.
Cherie, okay. Alyssa?
Where are you? Where
I'm
are
in
you?
Sacramento. I'm in Sacramento.
Okay.
I'm in Santa Barbara.
Oh, I'm from Sacramento. I actually think I saw
Okay.
you today.
Oh, you did? Okay. Joanna?
I'm in
What?
New Jersey.
And where?
New Jersey.
New Jersey. Awesome. New Jersey, Jersey. Obviously, you know what Teterboro is, right?
Yes, I do know where Teterboro is.
All right. I learned how to fly to Teterboro back in 1969.
Wow.
I know it's a long time, isn't it? Long time ago. It definitely
know
is
about
not
car
the
bike.
same. I went to high school in Queens.
So you're
Skyflower.
from-
I'm
you're
sorry. Go
from-
ahead.
You're from New York.
I live in New York. I was born and raised in Haiti. I live in New
Okay.
York for about 11 years, and then I moved on.
Okay.
Mm.
Very nice. Thanks for sharing.
Skyflower,
I'm from Mexico.
Mexico. Awesome. Oh, you in Mexico now or
No, in Houston.
in Houston? Good.
Yes.
And I see Mussolini. Anaya, where are you from?
I'm originally from Italia, from Italy, but I'm in
Okay.
Santa Barbara
You're
now.
Santa Barbara. Awesome. Okay. Let's see. We got Sherry. I think Kaylee.
Haley, she says on her chat, she says she's from Bend, Oregon, and she can't come off speaker because she's in a loud coffee shop.
Okay. But all right. And let's see. Mission Flight. We had you earlier. We saw your face head earlier, I think.
Yes, I'm in Los Angeles area.
Los Angeles, LA. Okay. Yeah. And you already have your private, you said, right?
I do. I'm just a rusty pilot, so I wanted to just start hearing
Oh, that's good.
information
Wow.
again.
Dale? Where's Dale from?
I live in Woodland right now.
Woodland. Awesome. Are
Yeah.
you still flying?
I just started resuming flying after a break for a couple of years due to COVID and taking care of old family members.
Okay. Sounds good. Where are you flying out of?
Right now, actually, I just went out with Sacramento there, but otherwise I've been doing my flight training at KEDU and university.
Okay.
And then before that, I did a lot of flying around Santa Paula, Camarillo, Oxnard area.
Okay. Sounds good. And we have one person that has a picture. I don't have a name next to Dale. Can you see who it is, Jamie? The
Let's
bottom?
see. Did we do Mia? Mia, well, everybody's got a different screen.
Okay.
We've got Mia and iPhone. I don't know who iPhone is, so Mia has to come clean and then iPhone is there.
All right, Mia. Where are you from?
Oh, she put on her chat, she from LA but lives in Sac.
Like Sacramento.
Yeah.
All right. An iPhone? On the chat?
Come on, iPhone.
It's Jordan from San Francisco.
Okay.
Welcome.
Second.
Thanks for joining.
Exactly. Well, I think that concludes. If anybody has any questions, if any of you will have any subject you want to discuss, during the next meeting, okay, next training session, feel free to email Jamie, okay? And we'll make sure we cover those prior to studying the next session, or, you know,
Next session?
questions or anything.
So the next session is 2 weeks from today. We do every other week on a Tuesday, 5:30 Pacific time. If you can't make it, we do record these and I could send you a link or whatnot, but we do like to have you present. So yeah, we try to send out, if you're not already on our email database, shoot me an email or a message or get a hold of me somehow. info@girlslovetofly.com is my email. And then I can make sure you're up to date with all of our newsletters and what's going on. But yeah, every other Tuesday, 5:30 p.m.
Okay, great. So the
So
next one,
helpful.
16th.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really
Yeah.
awesome.
Oh,
Like I
good.
said, you know, any subject you want to cover, just send us an email. We'll make sure we cover it for you.
Yay.
Okay?
Yeah, thank you so much, you guys. This is so nice and helpful. Appreciate it a lot.
You're welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you.
All
Appreciate
right.
it.
We'll see you in a couple weeks.
Yeah.
Okay. All
Take
right.
care.
Bye. Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Welcome. Bye-bye.